I've been here for a while, but good morning to you guys. It's great to have you on the panel. We were talking about health and wellness and the importance of building innovative impact businesses in more of the health tech space, and now we move more into climate. I think the topic of aligning purpose with profit and building purpose-driven goals with financial performance is an extremely important one. There is an expectation of the businesses over the past years of delivering, profitable businesses within the space of trying to save the world, which is what everyone on this panel, to a degree or another, is trying to do. So, before we dive into the panel, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves and just give a quick brief of your businesses.
Hi everyone, I'm Talal Hassan. I'm the CEO and founder of 4401. We are a carbon mineralization company, so we take captured CO2, that could be from direct air capture or carbon capture, and we turn that CO2 into rock deep underground and generate carbon credits from that.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Rick Fox, co-founder and CEO of Partana. We're a climate tech company born on the front line of climate change in the Bahamas. We believe that we can change the way the world builds by avoiding and removing CO2, like Talal's company, from our environment. It's possible for me to be here because of Hub 71. So I want to say thank you to Hub 71 for the amazing accelerator program we've been a part of. And that's led to not only leadership here in the region recognizing the value of all of these missions to help add value to our purpose and our planet and our people, but it's actually shown through action. So we're honored to be here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. My name's Elizabeth. I am the COO of Sawa. We are a fintech based here in the ADGM and regulated by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority. We originally started in 2017 and moved to Abu Dhabi in 2020. We allow people to invest their wealth and have their money grow for them through a number of different products, through investing, saving, trading, and crypto. And we have quite a few different model portfolios that allow people to invest sustainably, or halal portfolios to grow their wealth.
Thank you very much. So I think here we have an interesting mix of perspectives. Talal and Rick are on the, say, like carbon side, and like to move into that. But Elizabeth, maybe we'll start with you, looking at impact from more of a financial side. Can you walk us through a bit of Salwa's story? Why do you guys exist? Where did you find the gap in the market? And what are some of the outputs and outcomes that you found with your growth of being one of the leading fintech and impact-driven startups in the UAE and worldwide?
Yeah, sure. So we, like I said, we've got a number of model portfolios that allow for people to invest based on their values. So we can either do conventional portfolios, SRI, halal, or with trade, they can actually build their own portfolios based on what exactly they want. We've seen a shift towards making decisions more based on their values and moving away from the traditional investments more to things that people believe in. There's this huge shift of capital moving towards, I think people have realized what I think people have realized that just investing in the traditional has not been good for the world in general, and being apathetic to this and not actually caring doesn't make the difference, doesn't move the needle. So we've been able to facilitate people moving their money towards actual impact projects, investing in what they believe in, and so that's working quite well actually. Halal portfolios are probably more. We've seen a move towards more people investing in that than even the ESG portfolios or conventional.
Can you tell us some examples of some of these projects, or kind of just taking a step back for the audience, walk us through kind of the platform and how it works, and just give an example or two of these impact or eco projects that are part of the portfolio?
So they're not specifically projects, they're a portfolio of ETFs. For example, with our Invest product, they're a portfolio of ETFs that are either ESG focused, sustainability focused, halal focused, and then within that portfolio there's different risk levels depending on your appetite. So that's our model portfolios, and people can go in and choose which one works for them. Alternatively, we've got trade, and so if there's specific companies that you believe in, we see a lot of buy and hold with our traders. We do have day traders as well and swing traders, but a lot of it's about buying and holding in companies that you believe in. So we've also developed a lot of thematics around, for example, we've got commodity thematics, gold thematics, where people can go in and easily choose these companies, have a look at them, and decide what actually they want to participate in.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'll move on to the carbon side, looking at impact from a more deep tech perspective. And maybe I'll start with Talal, since you've been in the region for a while, and 4401 was incepted in Oman, and then you moved to the UAE. You were a Hub 71 startup, and then you closed a partnership with ADNOC. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey here and some of the, let's say, obstacles of delivering impact, or otherwise as well, like some of the challenges and opportunities that you found in your journey here?
Yeah, sure. So we started in Oman in the height of COVID. So whilst people were sheltering at home, we were a small group of us drilling boreholes in the Omani mountains and injecting CO2 into those boreholes. These were some of the first CO2 injections in these types of rocks.
Can you explain direct air capture 101 for the audience in a very because it's in this space we always talk about these terms, direct air capture, pumping CO2 into rocks, but just for dummies, let's water it down.
Sure. So carbon capture is when you capture CO2, and that can be from two main forms, either directly from the air, which is called direct air capture, or in short, DAC, D-A-C. And the second one is point source capture. So this is if you have a heavy industry and they have emissions, and you capture some of those emissions or the CO2 that comes from those emissions. So those are the two forms of carbon capture. And what we do at 4401, we don't do the carbon capture. We take that CO2 that they capture and we store it permanently, and we eliminate it by converting it into rock. So when we started in Oman, that was great, and we always had our eye on the UAE. These rocks which we use come to the surface in certain parts of the world, Oman and UAE being a couple of countries with very rich deposits of this rock. But what really attracted us to the UAE was the fact that we also, excuse me, we also had access to seawater, so we do need water for our process, and we had access to solar and green energy, which is also required for what we're doing. The talent as well was here in country, so we were always coming into the UAE and trying to work here. And when we learnt about Hub 71, we got in touch with them, and we were lucky enough to get on the cohort, and that just catalyzed things for us. And in early 2023, we signed a pilot agreement with ADNOC, and that was to deliver a direct air capture to mineralization project in time for COP28. We broke ground on that project in February, and we delivered the first injection of direct air captured CO2 in the region, in actually all of Asia, to mineralization on that site on the day of COP28.
Thank you, Talal. I'm going to ask you and Rick similar questions in a bit, but I'd love to hear about Rick's experience in a more, Rick has, with Partana, has moved to Abu Dhabi just very recently as part of the last cohort. They had our fundraising roadshow yesterday, and also very recently Partana closed or announced a partnership with Addio. Can you walk us through Partana, what you guys do also 101, and just your experience so far in the region?
Yeah, thank you. Talal, your story of COVID, I think, spawned your company. Same with us. During COVID, out of the disaster of a natural occurrence in my country, service became my journey to climate technology. I didn't expect to be in the space in the way that I found it. We're talking about purpose and planet and how we create impact. My initial impact intent was to build hurricane-proof housing in the Bahamas from materials that could meet the elements, i.e. flooding, salt water, wind, and traditional cement does not interact well with salt water. And so in just asking that question, I found myself going on a journey, and if it wasn't for COVID, I don't know if I would have spent the amount of time that I did, even though I wanted to have the impact at home. So that afforded me the opportunity to get to know my co-founder, the science in the lab, the fact that it had been patented. They had caught lightning in a bottle, as they referred to it, but they just didn't know how to bring it to the world. So when you think of how do you bring a disruptive solution to the world in an area where you've been for 200 years trusting Portland cement, or traditional cement as they call it, burning rocks, and those rocks are now that heat is turning against us. It raises all the questions that our climate technology companies are trying to do, right? Have a seat at the table with a solution that gets the attention of people that say they truly care. So balancing that impact with revenues and profits is a hard line, right? It's a hard line because we take a lot of CapEx. We take a lot of scaling belief. You can start at day one, year one, take money from a VC partner or an investor who says they're on the on the road for the whole journey. And if it took 200 years to be for traditional cement to be in the world to the stage it's at now, and development being linked to pollution, it's not going to stop. We're going to keep developing. So you need believers and impact investors who will go on that journey with you for the long haul. And the long haul isn't just when their fund is up in 3 years or 4 years. They have to believe that they can go find other people to join them in making sure that it becomes the solution that Talal's getting to, becomes the journey of 5, 6, 7 years when it becomes the impact on both sides of the table.
Thank you, Rick. We always talk.
Yeah,
Sorry, please.
No, I'd like to add to that. I think you said it's, finding the tension between those two. I think there isn't tension. If you find the right people, if you're respectful, if you're doing things transparently, if you're doing the right thing, then that attracts the right investors who come along and support you for your whole journey. I think that's really important, and whether that be the retail investors, whether that be the institutional investors, if you're doing things authentically, then you're going to attract the right things. That's just how it is.
Sorry, Zane, I have to say this. You're absolutely right about that, because on our cap table and our LPs, we have investors that are actually engaged in solving the problem with us. That is key. They are in the actionable side of this business, and so we appreciate that. But you have to find the ones that not only care and not only can fund, but they actually participate.
I absolutely agree. I think in the climate space, as I was saying earlier, there's a goal that's larger than time and life, right? It's kind of a long-term. We'd be lucky if we had our kids see it. Like when we're talking about decarbonization, it's setting these macro goals that we need different stakeholders to come together and push forward. And I think climate is one of those topics. Again, I always say it's quite horizontal. It's not just its own bucket of things. It can be looking at carbon is also quite horizontal. So everything around us is climate related to a degree or another, everything from supply chain to production to buildings to food, ag, water, protection of natural ecosystems. And that is becoming more and more apparent. And as much as I think getting the right people, so whether that's building teams and finding the right investors that have conviction and belief of these ideas, climate tech still faces a big challenge from the investment side, which I'd like to speak to Talal and Rick about, and the challenges of how do you your technologies require upfront investment, and they're very CapEx and OpEx heavy. And when you look at the scalability of them from setting up the first plant, it requires a lot of capital. Can you walk us through some of the challenges and how you pitch to investors to have conviction in something at a later stage, let's say. So maybe you have the angel investors on your cap table when you're trying to scale. What have your perspectives and experiences been in the climate tech space and the challenges as well?
I'll go first. Okay. So, yes, it's tough, first of all. It's very tough. When we first started, the market didn't exist, right? And there was no such thing as the market. And this is venture capital 101. What's the market size? What's the TAM? There was none. And I think that's really important to note. For us, it was the purpose. You know, we got together as myself and my co-founders, and you know, actually, just a quick hands up here. Does anyone here have children? Put your hands up. Yep. So when we figured out that actually our children will not have a planet that they can hand over to their next generation that they could predictably live on and thrive on, that was the purpose. That's why we set up 4401. There was no market data, there was no market size, and we've slowly kind of developed the technology, and now we've come to look at profitability and look at how we can bring investors in, and now we do have a market size. You know, people have come out, they've set net zero targets. There's the IRA out of the US that's incentivizing carbon credits. There's the voluntary markets. There's the 45Q. There's the European CBAM. And all these different policies, tools, mechanisms have effectively created a financial opportunity out of something that started with purpose. I mean, we all knew that eventually there would be a price on us having a planet that the future generations can pass on to each other. And just to give you a snippet, so now when we pitch to investors, it's very different from 4.5 years ago when we first started. But now we show them, okay, last year as a planet, we only sequestered 50 million tons of CO2. Today, there's a bunch of data out there showing we need to increase that by 100-fold. And that gap in infrastructure represents a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, and that's where we play. But just to add one more thing, I think it's really important to highlight that we are not sitting here saying that we're the silver bullet, we're going to do this ourselves. We need companies such as Partana, we need every tool in the toolbox out there, because this is an either we all win or either we all lose situation. You're not going to have market leaders popping up, which is typically the venture capital model where they look for the leaders. You're going to have a big group of companies that are able to make an impact, and we need to get all of them to revenue generation and profitability as quickly as possible.
I agree with that. Go where you're wanted. For this journey we've been on, we've chosen to spend the time with the people, the countries, places that not only need us the most, they don't have the time to wait. For example, in the Bahamas, where I'm from, we're slowly going underwater. So the urgency there speaks to solutions needing to show up today, not in 2050, not in 2060. So spend your time with those that are urgently seeking solutions, and you will find greater ease in partnership around funding. We started in some cases, I had access in the Bahamas, so we started at the top. We went to the leaders of the country. Same thing in any country we go to, business to government. In the case of disrupting any industry at scale, you need buy-in from the top. When they understand the vision and they can see the scale of it, and they can understand the impact it has for their people in their region, in the country, they will start to force action. And so when governments move, private sector adjust, citizens get impacted. And in our journey, we found here in the Middle East and the UAE, especially here in Abu Dhabi, that it's not just talk. We spent a lot of time in the first few years educating the people across from the table, educating the money, and getting them to believe that this journey of $400 billion addressable cement market could be disrupted, or that there could be a seat at the table for alternative binders and solutions that need to be implemented at whatever scale of cement is being used in that country. Maybe a small portion of that could be an alternative binder that moves us towards making healthier, more nature-positive solutions in the area of concrete. So if it wasn't for COP28 here last year, I wouldn't have known of the region's commitment at the scale that they're committed to. And so you spend the time with the people that are in action. You spend the time with the people that aren't just doing the talking. They're changing the legislation. They're calling for and stressing the private sector to make better decisions. And then they will find companies like ours, because we become the branch to deliver what the private sector is going to want, which is the end goal, which is to make money while making impact.
I totally agree. I think a hybrid of, or a top-down, bottom-up approach, and there's a sweet spot in the middle where, the different stakeholders come together. And I know both of you very well in your companies, and I think the challenge that you have is really huge, because you are the trailblazers, you're the pioneers, you're paving the way for these first-of-a-kind technologies. And it will be easier. You're making it easier for all of the similar other technologies that are going to follow your path, right? You're de-risking the path both from a technology point of view as well as an investment point of view.
I'm sure we don't know what it'll look like in 10 or 15 years, but we've walked into the abyss. And every so often we bump into other climate technology folks, and it feels a little more real, and we can hold on for a second and go, okay, I'm not alone in this crazy idea, but you're absolutely right. It may be the next person.
I remember 4401, so I'm an ex-founder as well of a climate tech startup, and it was also a COVID story. It was not in the deep tech space. It was a SaaS for, enterprise SaaS for carbon accounting. And Talal's co-founder, Karan, is a good friend, and we were both on Zoom, and he was like, I started a company, we're taking CO2, pumping it into rocks, and he sent me this deck. I was like, I'm helping save rainforests. It's like, okay, great. So I guess COVID was, ultimately, in retrospect, really good for the planet, gave everyone a minute to pause and look for solutions. But
made everybody vulnerable.
Yeah, everyone became, went back home and thought about purpose, which is the main topic of this panel. But since then, there was another company called Climeworks, and it was 4401, and that was a little over 4 years ago. And now, with our climate tech, when we're doing our applications, there's probably over a dozen companies that do exactly or similar things. So it's really inspiring, and it's a big challenge to take, to be like the first mover of a certain technology, but you're doing a huge favor for the market to shape up, and the appetite of the different stakeholders, whether it's government or investors, venture investors, institutional investors, to take note of. I'll switch gears a little bit to Elizabeth, and I'm curious to see from the investor point of view, what shifts have you seen from an investor demand for more purpose-driven financial products, and how has Sarwa adapted to this, and do you also see a first mover in this direction where other companies are following?
Yeah, for sure. So it's not necessarily a shift, it's more a reoccurring theme that we see. Again, I spoke earlier on our different portfolios, but what we're seeing is people are actually, they're seeing demonstrable action and actually moving their money and their capital to where they want to see, to industries like this, and focusing on good purpose. That's what we've seen, and we're growing with our clients as well. So as they become more sophisticated, we have an excellent education program as well. As they become more sophisticated investors, we also add products that support what they need, and de-risk as well. In terms of the products that we're adding, we continue to grow. We're very focused on our local community here in the UAE. We're born and bred here. We're focused on the UAE market. Before geographic expansion or anything like that, you want to make sure that you're supporting your community first. And that's what we do. So as our clients are growing, we're growing as well, adding products, adding adding different things. For example, we recently launched options where we're launching a Black Swan fund to protect. These things are what the clients are asking for. So if you focus on that and listen to your customers, like you said, listening to the governments that actually want what you want and are taking the action. So when you're supporting that, that's what we're finding. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting segue to another point I'd like to ask all of you, which is the power of like storytelling and positioning, and the power that the story of this larger purpose has in climate tech. Another way to see it is like your pitch, right? How are you pitching this to investors? How are you positioning the return, which is not necessarily financial return? Can you share some experiences with the storytelling on your different companies and what worked, what didn't, and if you have any advice for climate tech entrepreneurs in the audience, how do you convince them?
I would tell you, if you're a climate tech entrepreneur and a founder, well, first of all, you don't have time to be worried about it being an imposter or having imposter syndrome. There's no time for that. There's too much urgency. I had a challenge coming from professional sports. I'm not a material scientist, so what's the chances that someone's going to believe that I have potentially a contribution or a solution to the industry of cement? So I had to get past that barrier of getting past the questions about basketball or what is Rick Fox doing in concrete. And it wasn't until they understood that the urgency for me was survival for my own family and the impact of having experienced what that looks like on the ground firsthand. So you tell your personal experience of how climate change has impacted you, and then they realize that through COVID, if COVID was something that impacted the entire world and made us all feel vulnerable, climate change is the same. It's impacting all of us, whether you're feeling it on the ground or not. It's happening, right? It's moving towards COVID, heart attack, climate change, cancer. It's under the surface and it's moving, right? And so it's not until you realize that it's your own personal experience with it, does it collect and connect. And then you just build a team of experts, excellence, scientists that check all the boxes that say, okay, if you're not the material scientist, you've went and built a team of experts. And so then they can relax into that. And then throw yourself into all the possible testing and challenging they would give a company that's a climate tech company. You say you can do X, Y, Z, show us. Because at the end of the day, people want to touch, feel, see, and believe that it's real. And when you get past those points, then the story starts to take a momentum of its own. And you no longer have to show up and answer basketball questions. You show up and answer questions about cement. And so that journey isn't overnight, but it is a personally anchored story in real impact that you've experienced yourself and that has launched you into a purpose-driven fight. Because that's what this is. It's a fight day to day to keep our businesses alive, to find the right people that enroll and join us in the fight, but then to have those that are outside looking at us to join that mission and be a part of the fight.
I think that's brilliant. Rick's absolutely nailed the storytelling piece. I'll probably talk more on the pitching on the financial piece. So I come from a venture capital background. I was a venture capitalist prior to this, so I have an unfair advantage there. But when we go and we pitch, there's one thing which I wanted to highlight, which I've noticed over the last 4.5 years that I've been at 4401, is kind of the definition of near-term returns has changed. When I was in venture, climate tech funds were typically the 10 plus 1 years, so 10-year funds, and now they are at least 20-year funds. Mm-hmm. And that's a really interesting evolution. I think in Clean Tech 1.0, everyone went through that long cycle, and they did make decent returns at the end of it, and they've now adjusted their funds. I remember I was in Silicon Valley and I met with one of the big venture funds that was in climate tech, and they had a bunch of data over the last couple of decades that showed them that had they held on to their investments they're a 10-year fund. Had they held on for just 3 more years, they would have had a double-digit increase in IRRs on their fund. So I think that those data points are out there, and people are starting to, and these funds are in climate tech are starting to look more more long-term, which I think is important. For me, the other thing is being a venture capitalist. Previously, I would love to see laws, regulations, governments getting behind things, and we're starting to see that now with all these net zero targets and the incentives that we were talking about earlier. These give investors security. They know that, okay, a law has been passed and this has to happen. And I think that's something which has really helped us with combining the storytelling with the fact that a financial return is on its way.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to a very important piece that we maybe didn't really dive into this session, which is regulation, right? And how regulation pushes or incentivizes, investment and looking at allocation of capital. And I think this is a very important piece for the panel we had before for health tech and climate tech, which is kind of, I would say that this is not me, this is Patagonia, but it's the golden triangle of purpose, people, and planet, right? That's like the triple bottom line. And this is another, as we've heard from you guys and the health tech panel, I think the UAE is very interesting for kind of innovating new policies and regulations, and that makes it a very lucrative place to set up something that's more, risky or challenging or higher capex or opex, because it means that there's like a sandbox environment for pushing new regulations that would be very difficult to do in more legacy and institutional markets such as the US or Europe, as advanced as they are, right? So it's kind of an irony. Europe is extremely well regulated, but that regulation is almost a double-edged sword because it also it kind of guards innovation, but it prevents growth in a way. So how has your experience been from switching gears a little bit to the regulatory point of view, both from Sadwa's perspective, Partana with your eco-green cement, and with 4401?
I'll speak quickly to the experience on the ground here in Abu Dhabi. Hub 71 has been an amazing partner in opening those doors through the value creation team, connecting us to the stakeholders in government, connecting us to the private sector, at the highest levels, making sure they know our story, understand that we're here in the country and the impact we can have. The Ministry of Energy, I've had the chance to share our story with them, the understanding of what the brine and wastewater challenge in this country represents for the UAE, and the fact that they're looking to solve that problem and get to a zero liquid discharge, understanding our technology and what we do, how we can take that brine and convert it to and upscale it to a positive feedstock for good to solve another problem, which is a binder that we can make concrete that is actually avoiding all the negativity of CO2 and then also sequestering in a direct air capture fashion more CO2. Once you understand that, then the question comes across the table of, which is what legislation should we be creating? And when you hear that question, oh my gosh, like you feel like you have a partner. And when the partner's in the position to actually make those changes, then you can get the real traction that you're looking for. And so kudos to the leadership here because they're actually taking those actions and asking those questions.
I would agree with that. In the financial services industry here, the FSRA are absolutely amazing at doing public outreach and consultation papers and actually listening to what the firms need and what would be the most supportive. I find ADGM to be one of the more innovative regulators around here. And that's hence why we've moved as well and consolidated into our ADGM entity. There's a lot more freedom here with a lot of guidance as well, which is really appreciated. Yeah.
If I could just give a real life example, appreciate we're out of time, but so with what we do, there has to be some regulation. It's quite sensitive. We're taking CO2, we're putting it deep into the subsurface. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be verified. And we recently had legislation that came out in Europe. It took them years to work on that, and it finally came out. We had pretty much the same rules drafted up for us by the regulators here in a matter of months. So, it's months versus years, and it just echoes what the experience has been here on the panel, that people here communicate, they understand, they work collaboratively with multiple ministries, authorities, and they just come up with something that's purposeful and useful for us.
Well, we could go on for for hours, but the panelists will be around in case you have any questions. I want to thank you so much for your time and for, building purpose-driven businesses of the future for, the planet, for our kids. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep saving the planet.
Thank
Thank you. Round of applause for the audience.